Hello, my name is Jill, and I am a high school counselor. In this presentation, we will discuss effective study habits. There are 3 learning objectives for this presentation. After viewing this presentation, students will be able to discuss 3 misconceptions about learning, describe 3 strategies for effective studying that aid in long-term retention, and identify 3 study suggestions you can implement into your study routine. Many high school students do not realize that they use ineffective study habits when preparing for exams and then wonder why they do not produce the grades that they wish. In this presentation, I will talk about some of the misconceptions of studying and talk about effective study habits to help you better learn and retain material. The traditional study habits are not consistent with the evidence on effective learning. Just as you are taught how to tie your shoe, to spell, and to solve math problems, you need to be taught how to study effectively. Effective study habits help you to remember information in the future, and just like in all things in life, it takes practice. Learning is not about pouring facts into memory. It is the ability to retrieve knowledge from long-term memory when it is needed. Students are convinced there is a set level of intelligence. You are either born smart or you're not, but really, you're in control of your own learning. There's a common misunderstanding that learning comes easy for students who are smart, and if it does not come easy to you, then you're not smart. But this is not true, and again, you are in control of your own learning. Unfortunately, most students have poor study habits. These study habits have been used for a long time, but most do not realize these study habits are ineffective and do not help with retention. These study habits are often comfortable to you as a student and are assumed to be beneficial, but they are not. We will now look at some commonly used study habits. Brown, Roediger, and McDaniel found that the most commonly used study method is to read text several times. Many think that this rereading will burn information into memory. This is incorrect. It is true, rereading text will cause you to become familiar with the text, but this does not mean that you have mastered the material, because oftentimes you will be unable to recall it in the future, such as on a final exam. Repeated rereading uses your short-term memory but does not store it in long-term memory. Rereading causes an illusion of knowing. For example, when you have read your textbook multiple times, you become so familiar with the text you think you know it. However, when you're asked to recall the information on a test, you go blank. This is an example of a false sense of mastery. Highlighting books and notes is very similar to rereading text. When students repetitively highlight many times, students end up highlighting the majority of the text, which defeats the purpose. Like math practice, highlighting does not improve retention and gives you a false sense of mastery. Both math practice and highlighting are examples of repetitive practice. Repeating your practice without variability only makes you more familiar with the task or information and does not prepare you to apply it. This is not how tests or real life work. There is no consistent structure. If you always solve problems in the same way and in the same order, you will not be prepared when the structure has changed and problems appear in a different order. An additional misconception is the idea of learning styles. I'm sure you've probably taken a learning style test and have been told which way you learn best. There is no evidence that supports this idea, and it often becomes a roadblock for students because they see themselves as being able to only learn one way. While it is true that we may have a style of learning that we are more comfortable with, these are only learning preferences. It is not about the style, it is about being actively involved in your learning. Everyone can learn using all styles, so don't let this misconception slow you down. Let's quickly talk about how people learn. As you learn new information, it is first etched into short-term memory and then stored in long-term memory. If you don't access the information, it becomes less and less familiar and will eventually be forgotten. Retrieval practice is when you reach into long-term memory and pull information out to apply it. Practicing to retrieve the information from long-term memory will build more pathways, and the more times information is retrieved, the easier it becomes to remember the information when you need it. Now let's talk about effective strategies of learning. When learning is deep and meaningful, it takes more time and effort. This can often discourage you as a learner, but your learning will be more effective and remembered for later use. When you put in the effort to learn, the benefits are large when it comes to long-term retention and mastery. Also, when you attempt problems before you are given the answer, whether you are right or wrong, it's okay, you will better retain the information for when you need to use it again in the future. Remember, as we just talked about, studying that requires effort is productive. Take a look at this diagram. Nora studied for 4 hours straight with no variation and received a C. However, Leanne did a little spacing, 1 hour a day over 4 days, and varied it a little by adding in an additional subject, shown here by the different colors. She did better and received a B. Whereas Leslie spaced out her studying in small increments, a half hour a day over 8 days, as well as varying her study across 2 subjects. Her outcome was an A. Spacing your studying across days and varying it across types of problems and subjects helps you to adjust to different situations before you feel a false sense of comfort. Many times when you practice a similar problem over and over again, you think you have mastered it, but when it is mixed in with a different problem, it becomes unclear how to solve the problem. For example, finding the volume of a cone versus a cylinder, you may have mastered them both individually, but do you know which formula to use when it is mixed up on a test? Spacing and varying material trains your brain to use the information more widely than for a single task. Students often feel that more learning occurs when study is massed, done all together at once. This may be true for short term, but information will be quickly forgotten and long-term retention is not achieved. Allowing some forgetting to occur through spacing requires more effort, but will help you better remember the information when it comes to your final exam. Learning is more effective when you can relate to it. Reflective practice can create connections to your past experiences and emotions in a personal way, which will solidify content. These connections will help with long-term mastery of the content. You can also use reflective practice to think about experiences and create different ideas to deal with similar situations as they arise in the future. Testing is a form of retrieval practice. Testing also provides you with feedback to calibrate knowledge and correct mistakes. It also allows you to find out where your strengths and weaknesses are, which will help you to focus your study efforts. The act of taking a test requires retrieval from long-term memory, which reinforces learned knowledge, and every time this information is retrieved, the more readily available it will be in your memory. So be sure to take all tests and quizzes seriously, even the low-stake ones, because they are helping with your retention. By implementing small changes into your study habits, you can considerably increase the effectiveness of your study. You must be engaged and put forth the effort during your time studying for it to be productive. I know it will be hard to break your current study habits, but the outcome could be great. It is time to stop using all the ink in your highlighter and stop the continual rereading and start using the following suggestions for effective studying. One suggestion is to practice retrieval as you are reading. For example, once you finish a chapter, write down everything you remember. If you know you're missing important concepts, return to the text and fill in the blanks. This is also a great time to jot down questions that you may have to ask later in class. Another suggestion is to use flashcards as a study tool. As you are reading, write down key terms or concepts on the flashcard and use them to quiz yourself to increase your mastery of the content. Flashcards are an easy study tool that you can take with you on the go and allows for spaced retrieval. A third suggestion is to self-test. Quizzing yourself tells you what you know and also what you have left to learn. It will help calibrate your knowledge and correct any errors. You can do this by using the questions at the end of your chapters or in the back of your book, or by asking yourself questions as you read, such as, what are the key ideas? What terms are new to me, and how are they defined? And how do these ideas relate to what I already know? Also, one tool that you may find beneficial is concept maps. After reading, try to produce a concept map of the material from memory without relying on the text. Then you can return to the text and fill in the blanks. An additional tool that you may find beneficial for recall are memory cues. These cues take many forms such as numbers, images, rhymes, songs, or visual representations. Effective cues will link pieces of knowledge and turn them into usable knowledge. The picture on this slide is an example of a memory cue, using your hands as a representation of the solar system. In this presentation, I have discussed information in hopes that you can meet the three main objectives to gain better study habits. First, we examined several common misunderstandings in learning. Hopefully, you can now describe three of the common misunderstandings in learning, such as masked practice, highlighting, learning styles, and the use of repetitive practice. Second, we looked at various strategies to use for effective study habits that will aid in long-term retention. A few of these being retrieval practice, such as low-stakes testing, reflection practice, and spacing and varying your practice. Lastly, we discussed multiple effective study suggestions in hopes that you will be able to identify and work them into your study routine. Now that you are aware of several learning misunderstandings, and you now have some ideas of effective study habits, I have confidence that you will be able to find what works best for you, make better use of your time studying, and will see the great benefits. Good luck! Here is a list of references used to create this presentation.